Dear Diploma CET aspirants, in previous video we have seen different types of models, message passing model and shared memory model. Before that we also seen operations on the process. In this video we'll be seeing some basic concept related to process scheduling, then process scheduling criteria and process scheduling algorithm, different algorithms and some different levels of queue. Before starting this process scheduling concept, when processor wants to execute any process on the processor, it should be idle. Our scheduler will schedule the process for execution with the help of dispatcher. Dispatcher will take the process from ready queue and put into the running state. If you remember state transition diagram, there are total 5 states: new state, ready state, a running state, waiting state and terminated state. In any point of time, the processor is busy in executing the processes. While executing process, the processor can stop executing the current process because of some reason. We have seen those reasons in previous classes. First reason was, if any process wants some IO operation, then that process will be taken out from running state to and put into the waiting state. While executing, if any interrupt occurs, then that process will go from a running state to a ready state. If parent has created its child process, the parent process goes waiting state until the child process terminates with the help of wait system call. In another cases, if we are using a round robin scheduling algorithm, if any process meets the time quantum, that time the currently executing process can be kept into the ready queue. In any point of time, any process can execute on the processor, or that process wants some IO operation. Here our motto or objective of executing the number of process, it depends on how CPU we are utilizing. If the number of processes executed per unit of time are more, then it means that we are executing more number of processes within a given time. Here there are two cycles we have, usually CPU cycle. That CPU cycle is also called execution cycle, and one more is IO cycle. This CPU cycle and IO cycles are also called CPU burst cycle and IO burst cycle. When the processor is executing any process, the duration how much it takes, that we call it as a CPU burst. If that process wants some IO operation, how much amount of time that process wants spending time for IO operation, that we call it as a IO burst. Normally the CPU burst followed by the IO burst. CPU burst distribution is of main concern. If you see this diagram, in CPU burst we we are executing so many machine level instruction: load, store, add, store, read from the file. And later on we will be having IO burst. Then from IO burst we will be having CPU burst, again IO burst, CPU burst, IO burst. This goes until the processor completes the execution of that particular process. Now for execution of any process, the main role of scheduler is to select the one process from n number of processes. On what basis it's going to select? It selects the based on the some algorithms. Those algorithms are called CPU scheduling algorithms. Normally, when I say CPU scheduler, it uses the short term scheduler. We have three types of scheduler: short term, medium term, and long term. Long term schedulers are also called job scheduler, medium term schedulers are also called swappers or swapping, and short term schedulers are also called CPU schedulers. We are talking about CPU schedulers or short term schedulers. CPU scheduling decision may take place when a process, the decision of the processor can be done or taken among those four places. First is when process switches from running state to waiting state. That time also the decision has to taken by the processor. The second case, when process switches from running state to ready state, that time also the processor has to take the decision. The third case, the process switches from waiting state to ready state. If you remember the state diagram, state transition diagram, will understand this concept. The last case is when a process terminates, then it switches from a running state to terminated state. There are two types of algorithms. We have primitive and non-primitive scheduling algorithm. In general, primitive scheduling algorithm, if processor executing particular process, if any external or some because of some reason, when it stops executing current process and it allows for the other process for the execution, that concept we call it as a preemptive scheduling algorithm. In non-preemptive scheduling algorithm, the if any event or any interrupt occurs, even though the currently executing process will terminate, execute and terminate, that we call it as a non-preemptive scheduling algorithm. In this cases, 1 and 4 cases leads to non-preemptive scheduling algorithm, and remaining all will leads to preemptive scheduling algorithm. Consider access to shared data in preemptive. Consider preemptive while in kernel mode. Consider interrupt occurring during crucial I/O activities. This can be done in your preemptive scheduling algorithm. You know that the main work of scheduler is to select particular process among a number of processes, but who is going to send or dispatch that particular process from a ready state to a running state or to the processor? It is the job of our dispatcher. Dispatcher model, it is a software that gives control of the CPU to the process selected by the short term scheduler. This dispatcher will perform the context switching. Then second, what it does, switching to user mode. There are two modes usually we have in operating system: user mode and kernel mode. Anytime the operating system can switch from user mode to kernel mode and kernel mode to the user mode. The dispatcher is going to switch from our kernel mode to the user mode. And one more important task of dispatcher is to jumping to the proper location in the user program to restart that program. Usually when process has executed half, then in next time, if that same process wants to execute, this dispatcher is going to take the processor for particular location for executing the same process from the where it has stopped. Normally, what is the dispatch latency in general? The amount of time the dispatcher takes to dispatch that process from a ready state to running state. He says time it takes for the dispatchers to stop one process and start another running process. Here he says is the total amount of time the dispatcher takes to stop the current execution process and run or allow the next process for the processor. That amount we call it as a dispatch latency. This is very important concept, scheduling criteria. There are total 5 criteria we have. each criteria is important. Any one question we may expect from this scheduling criteria. He give the definition of this one and he ask the filling the blanks. The first criteria, on what basis I am going to select the CPU scheduling algorithm. First is CPU utilization. Our intention or objective is to utilize a CPU 100%. Practically it is impossible to use 100% CPU because of preemptive scheduling algorithm or some context switching mechanism. So for that, normally for heavy loaded systems we may go up to 90%, 95%. Lightly loaded systems will be having 50 to 60% CPU utilization. 100% practically it is not possible, but our intention is to use the 100% CPU. The second criteria is throughput. Throughput is nothing but if you want to execute, take the work from the system, we need to execute more number of processes in a given time. This throughput is nothing but the number of processes executed per unit of time is called throughput. Here in this operating system we call this concept as throughput. In computer networks, the number of packets sent per unit of time we call it as a bandwidth. Here in this scenario we call it as a throughput. Throughput is nothing but number of processes executed per unit of time is called throughput. Next, turnaround time. Turnaround time is the interval from the time of submission of a process to the time of completion is the turnaround time. In previous slide I explained the processor can do only two cycles, either CPU cycle or bus cycle. Processor can execute the process or that process can wait for the IO operation. Only two operation the process can be can do in your system. What he says is the turnaround time is nothing but when you submit any particular process for execution and when you complete that process, the total amount of time taken by that process we call it as a turnaround time. In that duration the process can be executing on the processor or that process can waiting for the IO operation. The total amount of time we call it as a turnaround time. Next is waiting time. Waiting time is simply a waiting time is nothing but it is the sum of period spent waiting in the ready queue. How long the process is waiting in ready queue, the total sum for particular point of time it has waited for 10 seconds and after some time again it has waited 10 seconds. The total is it has waited is 20 seconds. He says is sum of all the periods spent waiting in the ready queue is called waiting time. One more is response time. The amount of time it takes from when a request was submitted until the first response is produced, not the output. Suppose I ask a question to a student at 10 o'clock, then I asked the question at 10 o'clock and he responded at 10 5 minutes. Then again I will ask one more question at 10 5, he respond at 10 7. The response time of that person is only 5 minutes. We are not considering the second response, we are considering only the first response. That we call it as a response time. I repeat, the amount of time it takes from when a request was submitted until the first response is produced. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ರೆಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸ್ ಯಾವಾಗ ನಮಗೆ ಬರತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ನಾವು ಯಾವಾಗ ರಿಕ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ ನಂತರ ಆ ಡ್ಯೂರೇಷನ್ ವಿ ಕಾಲ್ ಇಟ್ ಆಸ್ ಎ ರೆಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸ್ ಟೈಮ್. Now we'll see some important scheduling algorithms. By seeing previous question paper, he did not ask any problems on scheduling algorithm, but he asked the concept behind that particular algorithm. First we'll see the first come first serve algorithm, that is also called FCFS. Here it is a table there are three processes are there, P1, P2, P3. Then each process has corresponding burst time. You remember burst time is nothing but CPU time. That means that P1 process, its burst time is 24. Normally these all values in terms of millisecond. 24 is nothing but P1 wants to execute 24 millisecond on the processor, P2 wants to execute 3 millisecond on the processor, P3 wants to execute 3 millisecond on the processor. Here, as the algorithm says, which process has entered into the system, that we need to execute first. Since P1 has entered first, then P2, then P3. To execute, to calculate the waiting time and average turnaround time, and average waiting time, we need to take the help of Gantt chart. That Gantt chart is used to identify the waiting time and turnaround time. What is waiting time and what is waiting turnaround time, we have seen in previous slide. Okay, I'll come back to again previous slide because I wanted to explain. For these 5 criteria, always CPU utilization should be high, and for second criteria, throughput should be high, turnaround time should be less, waiting time should be less, response time should be less. If it is less, then the response of particular system is more. Here we need to try to understand the concept, or waiting time should be less. Once the waiting time is less, automatically the turnaround time is less, because turnaround time is depends on the waiting time. With the help of Gantt chart, we are going to calculate the waiting time and average turnaround time. In this, we are only calculating the waiting time. If you know the waiting time, we definitely know the turnaround time with the help of waiting time plus burst time. That gives the turnaround time. Now we start at 0th millisecond. In burst time, we need to calculate all 24 plus 3 plus 3, it is 30. You have to write 30 last. Then since P1 has entered first, P1 starts executing. You know that it executes total 24 millisecond from 0th millisecond to 24th millisecond. Since this is first come first serve scheduling algorithm, P1 will completely execute. Once it executes completely, it terminates. Once it terminates, the next process is P2. P2 starts executing from 24th millisecond, and it wants to execute 3 millisecond on the processor. From 24 plus 3, 27 up to 27th millisecond, P2 will execute. Then after terminating P2, P3 will start executing from 27th to 30th for 3 millisecond. Now we have drawn this Gantt chart. How do you identify the waiting time? We need to identify the individual waiting time. Now, since once the P1 has entered into the system, it starts executing on the processor. It has started at 0th millisecond and it has ended at 24th millisecond. This P1 did not wait on the system, or it did not wait on the ready queue. It's as soon as it enters into the system, it starts executing. So waiting time of P1 is 0, but P2 has waited until the P1 completes its task. So waiting time of P2 is 24 millisecond. Then after that, P3 process has entered. Until P1 and P2 completes, P3 does not start. So P3 has waited for P1 and P2 to complete. P3 has started at 27th millisecond. It means from 0 to 27, it has waited totally 27 millisecond. The waiting time of P1 is 0, P2 is 24, P3 is 27. How do you find the average waiting time? It is simple. Sum of all the waiting time divided by the number of processes. Here 0 is the waiting time of P1, 24 is the waiting time of P2, 27 is the waiting time of P3. sum divided by the, there are total 3 processes are there, divided by 3, it is 17 millisecond for this question. Now, with the help of this waiting time, you can also get the turnaround time. You know what is turnaround time? Turnaround time, we simply call it as a waiting time plus burst time. We got to the know the waiting time, then it is very easy to identify individual turnaround time. Individual turnaround time of P1 is 0 plus 24, for P2 24 plus 3, then P3 27 plus 3. We need to add all this. Again we need to take the average of all process, that comes as average turnaround time. Okay. Next we will have the another case. Suppose the sequence of processes are executed in different way, as the shortest burst time executes first, and we will see the impact of this calculation on waiting time and average waiting time. Now, let P2 executes first, P3 executes next, and last P1 will execute. So, in this case the waiting time of P2 is 0 of course, and waiting time of P3 is 3, then waiting time of P1 is 6. If you add all this one, it is 9, total waiting time is 9, and divided by 3, because 3 processes will get 3 millisecond as the average waiting time. As I said earlier, the waiting time should be lesser, it should not be higher. If you compare to previous example, the waiting time was, average waiting time was 17 millisecond, and here average waiting time is 3 millisecond. Which among these two, which is the best? This is the best for FCFS, because we have executed the processes which has the less burst time. So, we got the average waiting time less. It means that if we execute larger processes, burst time processes, then it takes larger waiting time. So, that we need to execute the smaller burst processes, so that we will get the average waiting time less. So, this leads to what? It leads to the next algorithm, that is shortest job scheduling algorithm. Now, convoy effect, there is a concept called the convoy effect, short process behind the long process. Normally, when I have the long process first, then after that we have the small process size, that leads to what? The large average waiting time. So, that effect we call it as a convoy effect. Instead of executing as they appear, what we do in next scheduling algorithm is, which process has the less burst time, that we are going to execute first. In this case, there are total 5 processes, 4 processes are there, P1, P2, P3, P4. P1 wants to execute 6 millisecond, P2 wants to execute 8 millisecond, P3 wants to execute 7 millisecond, P4 wants to execute 3 millisecond. According to this, which process has the less burst time? It is of course P4, then we have P1, then we have P3, then last is P2. In this sequence we need to execute. So, this leads to what? Shortest job first. Which has the shortest job, we need to execute first. Now, we will execute P4 first by drawing the Gantt chart. By drawing the Gantt chart, P1 executes for 3 millisecond up to 3 millisecond. Then next shortest job is P1, it wants to execute total 6 millisecond from third to total 9, 3 plus 6 up to 9 it executes. Then next process is P3, from 9 it executes 16, because from 9 it wants to execute 7, 9 plus 7 it is 16. The last process, the largest process we are executing at the end, that is P2, from 16 to 24 it wants to execute total 8 millisecond. By seeing this diagram, average waiting time, individual waiting time of P4 is 3, then sorry, P1 waiting time of P1 is 3, waiting time of P2 is 16, waiting time of P3 is 9, waiting time of P4 is 0. So if you do this calculation, sum and divided by number of processes will get 7 millisecond as your average waiting time. We have another flavor of the shortest job scheduling algorithm is called shortest remaining time first algorithm. Normally this shortest remaining first algorithm is of variant of your preemptive scheduling algorithm. FCFS is purely non-preemptive scheduling algorithm, and normally shortest job algorithm is also preemptive, non-preemptive scheduling algorithm. When we given the arrival time, that time we use the concept called shortest remaining time first or SRTF. They may ask the long form of SRTF also. Here in this we have three columns: process, arrival time and burst time. Arrival time indicates at what time each process has entered into the system. P1 has entered at 0th millisecond and it wants to execute 8 millisecond. P2 wants to execute 4 millisecond and it has entered at 1th millisecond. P3 wants to execute 9th millisecond and it has entered into the system as at 2nd millisecond. P4 wants to execute 5 millisecond and it has entered at 3rd millisecond. For this diagram we have the Gantt chart. Gantt chart, you remember in SRTF that for every one single clock cycle the system is going to check, operating system is going to check are there any shortest job in a ready queue comparing with the currently executing process. If the currently executing process is larger than any process in the ready queue, the currently executing process will be temporarily suspended and will be kept into the ready queue. So here since in 0th millisecond only P1 has entered, so the operating system start executing P1 for 1 millisecond. After executing 1 millisecond from P1, we left 7 more millisecond it wants to execute. Meanwhile, P2 has entered into the system at 1th millisecond. Compared to 7, 4 is the lesser. 4 is the lesser. So P2 start executing. For 1 millisecond. After that, we got the P3 process. Since compared to P2 and P3, already 1 millisecond is executed by P2. 3 and 9 among P2 and P3, P2 is the lesser. Then after 1 millisecond P2 executes 1 more millisecond and 2 more millisecond it wants to execute. Meanwhile, P4 entered into the system, its burst time is 5. Compared to this all processes, P2 has the lesser burst time. So P2 completely executes its task for 4 millisecond. Once it completes its task, it terminates. Then remaining processes left are P1, P3, P4. Already one burst time is executed by P1, 7 has left. P3, 9, P4, 5. The next shortest job is P4. So P4 executes for remaining 5 milliseconds from 5 to 10. Next process shortest job is P1, since it has 7 in it. So P1 will execute from 10 to 17. Remember that P1 is already executed 1 millisecond at the beginning. Once it completes its task, it terminates. The only lone process left is P3. P3 starts executing at 17th millisecond. It completes its task at 26th millisecond by executing total 9 millisecond. Now we need to calculate the individual waiting time of processes. Since we need to consider the arrival time, P1 has entered at 0th millisecond. So this P1 has executed twice, from 0 to 1, then 10 to 17. From 1 to 10 it has waited. From 1 to 10 means from 0 to 1 it did not wait. This 0 to 1 we need to remove from 10. So the total waiting time of P1 is 9. So then P2's waiting time is P2 has started execution at 1 millisecond, but when it has arrived 1th millisecond, 1 minus 1 it is 0. Next for P3, P3 P3 waiting has started execution at 17th millisecond, 17th millisecond. When it has arrived 2nd millisecond, from from 17 we need to subtract this 2 because it has arrived at 2nd millisecond, 17 minus 2. Then P4 start executing at 5th millisecond, but when it has arrived 3rd millisecond. So we need to subtract that 5 minus 3. Why 3 means it has arrived at 3rd millisecond, from 3rd we need to consider up to 5th, that is the waiting time of P4. When I do this operation, we will get the 26 total as the waiting, 9 for P1, 0 for P2, 15 for P3, then 2 for P4 as the individual waiting time. After that I will get 26 by 4 because 4 is the number of processes attend. I will get the 6.5 as the 6.5 millisecond as the total average waiting time. This is shortest remaining time first algorithm. Next algorithm is priority scheduling algorithm. In any operating system, some processes are having some urgency, they have importance, those processes execute first, then those processes will execute first based on the some priority or importance given to them. How that operating system assigns the priority for these processes? By assigning some integer value to them. In some operating system, the 1 is the highest priority, one integer value 1 can be highest priority. In some operating system 1 can be lowest priority, depends on the operating system, we use the priority values. The CPU is allocated to the process with the highest priority, smallest integer, highest priority. In this priority scheduling algorithm, we have preemptive as well as non-preemptive scheduling algorithm. The problem with this priority scheduling algorithm is, assume that if every time highest priority process enters into the system, then lowest priority process indefinitely wait into the ready queue. This problem we call it as a starvation. Starvation is nothing but if the highest priority process always enters into the system, the lowest priority processes keeps waiting indefinitely into the ready queue. That situation we call it as starvation. The solution for that starvation is aging. He may ask the question, what is aging or what is the starvation for your examination. The solution for starvation is aging. What is aging? For particular time period you are increasing the priority for processes. At particular point, any lowest priority process can become a highest priority. That time that particular process will get a chance to execute on processor. We see some simple example on this priority scheduling algorithm. Here we have taken the smallest number as the highest priority. It means that 1 is the highest priority, 5 is the lowest priority. We have 5 processes here, and each process has their own burst time and their own priority. It means that P1 wants to execute 10 millisecond and its priority is 3, P2 wants to execute 1 and its priority is 1. Here 1 is the highest priority, 5 is the lowest priority. 1 is the highest priority, 5 is the lowest priority. Among these, we consider the only priority. The highest priority process will execute first and lowest priority process will execute last. In this table, the highest priority process is P2 first, then P5, then P1, then P3, then P4. So we'll start drawing the Gantt chart here. First, at 0th millisecond, since P2 is the highest priority, P2 start executing for 1 millisecond. After 1 millisecond, P2 will terminate. After that, we have the second highest priority is P5. P5 start executing at 1th millisecond, at it finishes at 6th millisecond because it wants to execute total 5 millisecond, 1 plus 5 it is 6. Then next highest priority is P1. P1 wants to execute total 10 millisecond from 6 plus 10 up to 16 it executes and terminates. Next highest priority process is P3. P3 wants to execute total 2 millisecond from 16 to 18 it executes and terminates. The last process left and lowest process priority process is P4. It wants to execute only 1 millisecond from 18 to 19 it execute. The waiting time of each process is P1 waiting time. Here they have not given the arrival time. You can easily identify, find out the individual waiting time. P1 waiting time is 6, P2's waiting time is 0, P3's waiting time is 16, P4's waiting time is 18, P5's waiting time is 1. So, finally, we will get value the sum of all these waiting time divided by number of processes 5. At end we will get the average waiting time as 8.2 millisecond. Next important scheduling algorithm is called round robin. Here round robin uses the concept called time quantum, or sometimes it is also called time slice. Time quantum, as you know that the problem of your priority scheduling algorithm is starvation. To overcome that problem, we use the concept called aging. If I want to give the equal importance to all the processes, then I can go with the round robin algorithm. In round robin algorithm, they assign the some time for execution for individual processes. If it meets the time quantum, then even though it wants to execute more number of burst cycles, then temporarily that process will be suspended. In next turn, the same process will be allocated for continuing its execution. The time quantum, sometimes it is also called time slice. We will see example of this time round robin algorithm with time quantum 4. It means that every process has the capability to execute only 4 millisecond at a time. If it wants to execute more than 5 millisecond, it will execute in next round. Now, we have 3 processes here. P1 wants to execute total 24 millisecond, P2 wants to execute 3 millisecond, P3 wants to execute 3 millisecond. So, P1 executes 4 millisecond and temporarily it will be suspended. Again it will be allowed for P2 for execution, since it has the permission 4 millisecond, but it wants to execute only 3 millisecond. From 4 to 7 P2 will execute. Then next process is P3. Again P3 wants to execute only 3 millisecond, since it is allowed for 4 millisecond. From 7 to 10 it executes and terminates. Now, P2 and P3 has terminated, only one process left is P1. From 10th millisecond it executes up to 13th millisecond for every 4 time quantum. 10 to 14 it executes. If any process has entered into the system, that process will be allowed for next. Since there are no processes in our system, P1 will take the whole control of the processor. It executes for every 4 millisecond and it completes its execution at 13th millisecond. The problem with this round robin algorithm is the selection of time quantum value. If you see this diagram, if I select the time quantum as 12 and if I select the time quantum as 6, time quantum as 1, what is the chance of having, if I select the time quantum of 1, there is a more number of context switches. In this scenario we have 9 context switches. If I select the time quantum as 6, there can be one context switch. You know what is the meaning of context switch. Then if I select 12 as the time quantum, then there is a chance of 0 switch. Now, problem in this round robin, if I select the more number of time quantum value, then your round robin act as a FCFS algorithm. If I select the lesser time quantum value, there is a more number of context switch. If there is a more number of context switches, then your algorithm becomes slower. Then we have some multi-level queue scheduling algorithm. Uh, some processes are foreground processes, some processes are background processes. Normally foreground processes are interactive and background processes are batch processes. What we need to do is we need to arrange all these processes in a particular queue. In this case we are going to assign for foreground processes who are using the round robin, they will be put into the foreground processes. Who are using the FCFS, those are put into the background queues. Scheduling must be done between the queues. Fixed priority scheduling, time slice. Each queue gets a certain amount of CPU time which it can schedule among its processes. If you see this diagram, multi-level queue scheduling, we have different types of processes: system processes, interactive editing processes, batch processes, student processes. Normally this system process has the highest priority and student process has the lowest priority. Instead of putting all the process into the single ready queue, we'll be having different multi-level queue scheduling algorithm. If any system belongs to system process, those will be put into the system processes. If any process belongs to interactive, those process will be put into the interactive queue, interactive process queue. It is very easy to distinguish the process and allocate these process for the execution. Multi-level queue feedback scheduling algorithm. A process can move between the various queues. Aging can be implemented this way. Multi-level feedback queue scheduler defined by the following parameter: number of queues, scheduling algorithm for each queue, methods used to determine when to upgrade a process, method used to determine when to demote a process, method to determine which queue a process will enter when that process needs. There we had individual queue. Instead of having individual queue, we are having the feedback multi-level feedback queue. We'll be having different types of queue. If any one queue is empty and other queue is full, overflowing, then that overflowing queue will be again put given feedback to the empty queue. That is the concept behind your multi-level feedback queue. Here in this first queue we use the round robin algorithm. In second also we are using round robin. In first with the time quantum 8, and in second queue we use the time quantum 16. In third queue we use the algorithm FCFS. Suppose in first queue it is empty, then in second queue if it is empty, then the processes are in first queue will be given to the second queue. This will lead to the speed of execution of your processes. Normally the three queues in this uh, we use round robin algorithm. These first two are using the round robin and last one is using FCFS algorithm. A new job enters Q0 which is served FCFS. When it gains CPU, job receives 8 millisecond. If it does not finish in 8 millisecond, job is moved to the Q1 queue. At Q1 job is again served FCFS and receives 16 additional millisecond. If it is still does not complete, it is preempted and moved to the Q2. Q2 is nothing but your FCFS. It means that any process is put into the first queue. If it does not finish within 8 millisecond, that will be put into the next queue, and if it does not finish within 16 second, that will be put into the last queue, that is FCFS queue. Thank you. That's all.